Hello everyone and welcome. Today we will be learning on how to draw a graph for a given dataset using Microsoft Excel. When you are drawing a graph, there are two types of data series that you could use. One will be used to draw a simple graph and the other datasets will be used to draw a compound graph. So let's look at a simple graph. For a simple graph, we would be having one data series for the independent variable and another data series for dependent variable. In this example, I have used 12 bacterial species for the independent variable and number of bacteria in each of those species as the dependent variable. Now, let's look at how to draw the graph. To do that, you have to first select all the data in your series and go to Insert, then select the graph type that you want from these options. I would be drawing a column graph, a 2D column graph, and your graph would be looking like something like this. Now, even though this graph looks good to the eye, if you are planning to use these graphs for a journal publication, these type of graphs are not suitable because for a journal publication, you have to use a minimalist design graph, which means that you can't use these flashy blue colors and etc. So we have to edit this graph. Let's look at how to edit a simple graph. Now, first to remove these blue colors from the bar lines, right click on a graph and then click Format Data Series. And now with this fill option, you can choose a solid fill. And for the color, I recommend shades of gray or white as your bar color. I would use this dark gray color. And for the border of each of these bar lines, you can use a solid color of black. And now, yes, this looks nice for a journal publication. Now, then you can format these grid lines as well. Now I would be choosing a dash type grid line for this graph. To do that, you have to right click on these grid lines and then click Format Grid Lines. Then using the Line Style tab and choosing a dash type, something like this, you can have a very nice grid line of a dash type. And now this looks really fine. Now you can format the entire chart area also. To do that, right click on the graph and then click Format Chart Area. Now, I recommend using a solid line for the graph. A black color border would look really nice. Now see? And now for the background color. For the background color, you can use a solid fill of white color, which would be really nice for a professional graph. And now you can edit these x-axis and y-axis data as well. To do that, you have to click on the x-axis, right click, and then click Format Axis. Now you have this Axis Options tab. As you can see, we have some small dashed lines between the columns. Those are called as major tick marks. See what we can do to those major tick marks. You can remove them or you can plot them inside the graph as well. But this doesn't look very professional, so we would use outside option. And then this minor tick mark means it will mark the data plot of the bar graph like this. See, you can see that tick mark appears on each of these bar lines, data points. You can add them according to your preference. And then finally, you can edit these titles for the chart as you like. I would use the title number of bacteria, and here you have the legend of the graph. You can change the position of the graph, the legend, or else you can delete it, or you can format the legend according to your preference. But I am comfortable with this legend available here. So this is how you can prepare a simple graph. Now let's look at a compound graph. A compound graph will have more than two variables. Here we have three variables, and these three variables contain ppm value. ppm means parts per million value, and the bacterial species and the number of bacteria. Parts per million value means if you take a water sample and divide it into a million parts and take 300 parts out of that million, it means 300 parts per million. And then inside that 300 parts per million, we have 4 bacterial species. And in each of those bacterial species, we have this number of bacteria. This is the meaning of this data set. So for 400 from EC bacterial species, we have 25 number of bacteria. Let's see how this would look when we draw a graph. First, you have to select the data and then click insert, and then a column graph would be nice. Now, here we have a compound graph. Now, for this graph, as you can see, we have two variables for the independent variable, which means the x-axis, and the number of bacteria along the y-axis. According to ppm value 300, there are 4 bacterial species. And again, according to 400 ppm, you have the 4 bacterial species, and 500 the same. And now we will edit this graph again. When you have to remove the color, right click it, format data series, fill, solid fill, a shade of gray, and a border color of black color would be fine. And then for the grid lines, we would use a line style of a dash type, and this looks nice. And now, as you can see, we have the major tick marks very clearly between 300, 400, 500 ppm values, and also between the bacteria species. So you can edit them also using format axis. You can include even a minor tick mark to this series, and this looks very nice when you include a minor tick mark. You can remove these if you like, but I recommend keeping them. Now you can edit the x-axis using these tabs as well, but I don't recommend using this because it would add more design to the axis. Now you can edit the chart title. You can edit the legend as you wish. And here we have a very nice column graph for our dataset, which is a compound graph. Now, what if we can use a line graph for this one? Let's see how a line graph would look with this dataset. Now, I have to select again the dataset, then click Insert, and then click a line graph, a 2D line graph I would be using. And now, here we have really nice line graph for our dataset. And now, what I want to show you is how to add a linear regression trend line for this graph. To add a linear regression trend line, you have to click on the graph and then right click it, then click Add Trend Line. Now you can select the linear option and you have the trend line of our data series. And you can add the equation of this trend line on the graph itself using this option, Display Equation on Chart. Now you can edit the position of this equation like this, and this would look really nice. And that is how you can add a linear regression trend line for the number of bacteria. You can change the color of this graph like that. And this looks really nice for a journal publication. You can fill a white color for the background and a border of black color would be nice for the graph.